Questions. We'll jump right into this. But I'd like to introduce the entire board to a newly proposed project. We've been attempting for years to find ways to maintain and upgrade many of our county-owned buildings. Several years ago, we met up with SmartWatt, fellows who are on the call today, and ladies, who now operate under Centrica. And they assisted us in phase one of an energy project that mostly updated all of the HVAC equipment in the public safety building, as well as controls and lighting at 325 Columbia Street. This project focused on the most energy inefficient buildings we own, and we were able to complete a lot of much needed work and pay for it over a period of years with a combination of energy savings and maintenance cost reductions. This was a very successful project, and I was pleased to work with SmartWatt throughout this project. We began discussing phase two project by looking at which buildings needed the most. We began to focus mainly on 401 State Street, which was a building that we purposely left out of phase one because there had been some discussion of remaining in this building or relocating offices that are housed here. For those of you who are newer to the board, you should know that many years ago it was imagined that we would relocate many of these offices to Aquamic School out in Philmont. Then later the old Walmart building in Greenport was considered. In more recent times, we considered the John L. Edwards building across the street. It appears now that that building is being eyed for much needed housing here in Hudson. All this time, maintenance on 401 was deferred in this building that houses many important departments. I knew that the outdated HVAC systems and lightings could easily capture some substantial energy savings. My concerns were the lack of ADA features in this building, along with other aging features that have been a long time consideration of how to upgrade or do we stay here. I would like to remind everybody that in 2019 we completed a facility condition assessment report that informed us that 401 State Street would require about $4.2 million investment in the near future if we wanted to remain here. And it really didn't dive into the ADA needs of the building, only to say that they needed to be further evaluated. The proposal you are about to hear about, although designed and organized as an energy project, also contains consideration of the ADA upgrades that are needed in this building, as well as things like a new roof. Those kind of things have been put into the budget many times in the past, and then omitted due to cost concerns. I'd now like to turn the meeting over to Mitch Toombs from Centrica, who will present a consideration of phase two of our energy project. There you go, Mitch.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. And good evening, members of the board. Appreciate your time this evening. As Ron mentioned, my name is Mitch Toombs. I'm the account executive for Centrica Business Solutions, formerly known as SmartWatt Energy. So middle of last year, the company changed their name to Centrica. So if you see things kicking around the county buildings that reference SmartWatt, that's us. If there's things now that you're seeing with Centrica's name on it, that's also us. So we're still working through getting used to that. We were SmartWatt for almost 20 years, and now we have a new name to get used to. But still the same faces, still the same team. Just a little bit more we can offer our customers, which is great. So along with me tonight, I also have my team. Scott Clark, our project director, is on the call. Ryan Urschel, our senior energy engineer, is also on the call. They were both heavily involved with the phase one project and have been heavily involved with the phase two so far. And then Megan Kennedy is also on the call, our energy engineer, who has been heavily involved with the phase two project. So really appreciate your time. And before we jump into the slides, I just want to take this opportunity, since I have all of you, just to commend you guys and specifically Ron and his team on how much of a pleasure it's been to work with you. We work with a lot of county customers and do a lot of work across the country, specifically here in New York State quite a bit. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with Ron and the rest of the Columbia County team since we connected almost 2 years ago and kind of started talking about what your needs were. They've only provided support and insight to us to help get the job done and make it a full success. Brian McDonald and his team specifically, and really everybody we work with. So I just want to say thank you for that. It's not always the case. So when we get that opportunity to find a really great customer like you guys, We just want to say thank you and let you know that we really appreciate it. So looking forward to more success working together. But with that said, I want to move it along and start the slide deck. So let me see if you can see the second slide here. Can you see that second slide, Kelly?
No, it didn't change much.
Okay, should be changing soon. Hopefully it moves along here. I'm seeing it moving on my screen. I'm not sure why it's not showing there. Hold on one second. Let me move out of this.
There you
How
go.
about now? Okay.
Yep. It's
All right.
up.
So I figured a good place to get started and talk about is just a little bit more background on the contract itself, how we contracted the first job and what we're looking to do with the second job, and then give you guys a recap on the phase one project. I know Ron just touched on it a little bit. Just give you a little bit more background, whether you weren't involved at all, whether you weren't with the county at the time, or whether you were involved and you didn't know how it finished out. It's always good, especially when it went so well, to talk about that. So first and foremost, the way we contracted the phase one project was through a National Grid UESC program that we were able to bring to the table with the county. We are the approved subcontractor for National Grid on that program, and it really allows municipal customers across the National Grid territory to contract directly with National Grid for any energy conservation projects that you're looking to complete. And so the county vetted that as a potential opportunity, approved it, and it really allowed us to streamline the process and make it really easy for you as the county to get the project done and contracted. Currently, the county has an active MSA with National Grid to utilize the program. So we're looking to do the same thing with this phase two project, as Ron just touched on. Because it has energy related components to it, it certainly falls into that program and can be utilized. And so we're looking to just kind of keep that streamlined approach and go about it the same way. The phase one project, so as Ron mentioned, that went really well. So it was approved back in 2019, the end of 2019. We probably started it beginning of 2019, and it actually went pretty fast through full development for the size of the project that was completed. But the full completion was actually done at the end of last year. A lot of it happened throughout, the heavy part of COVID-19 hitting our area. So again, hats off to the county and our team for really working together seamlessly to deliver that project and really not have it slow down at all. There were a couple moments where we had to pause, but we were able to get it fully done and every item upgraded as part of the project. The buildings that were included in scope were the public safety building, human services, the highway garage, and DSS. But the bulk of the project really took place at the public safety building. That's the building that really started the conversation a couple of years ago due to just the dire need of improvements with the energy systems. Much of almost everything there, if it wasn't original, it was failing or falling apart. And you guys were doing the best you could to put it back together and keep it running. And it was a really good opportunity for us to come in and help you guys, look at some improvements, implement them, and then use the savings to pay for it. So the list of measures or energy conservation improvements that we did as part of the job are listed here below. Lighting upgrades were done at every single building. We went from fluorescent or HID technology to LED, which is the latest lighting technology. It offers, low wattage. They're pretty much maintenance free. There's no mercury, so it's not bad for the environment, and controllability is a lot better as well. And you'll see that'll be part of the phase two project as well. Anywhere we can find lighting, still not updated. Building envelope was also an improvement. So this is weatherization, any areas that, there was not proper sealing or roof wall joints, that insulation was no longer there or wasn't really doing its job. Doors that had openings that weather was able to get through, where it made sense, we put those improvements in. It really complements most of the jobs we do and just makes the buildings a lot more comfortable from heating and cooling and just the occupant standpoint. Windows at the highway garage. So this was an item that was not originally in the scope and really found its way in because they've been there a long time. The old windows, I think they were 100 years old or more. And as part of the job, there was enough savings to fit them in. And kind of the conversation was, we either do it now or it's not going to get done. So we were able to find a solution that made sense and get those updated, which was a really good measure. Building automation system. So this is the controls within the buildings to help operate the heating and cooling systems so that they just don't run wild or just do whatever they want. You didn't really have too much going on from that standpoint in the public safety building or human services. And what you had was very old and manual. So we were able to update that. So along with the new systems, now you're able to control them a lot more efficiently and run them when you should be running them, and not when they shouldn't be on. The other nice feature, and I know Brian McDonald really liked this, was the ability to have alerts and notifications if things weren't operating or if something went down or if there was a failure. Before this system, the only way to find out was to show up in the morning and notice the building was down, and that could cause a lot of problems, especially if it's in the middle of winter with no heat. So really good system, a big part of the energy savings, and gives you a lot more added benefits as well. Water source heat bumps, big measure, a lot of those at the county jail. Rooftop units, again, the public safety building is where we updated those. Pumps and VFDs, the heating boilers, and the hot water boilers and tanks, all at the public safety building. So pretty much anything energy related at the public safety building was completely updated or replaced. That was done and completed at the end of 2020. So everything should be operating very efficiently now. There should be a lot of extra comfort. And the best thing is there's a lot of extra cost savings. So as part of the job, we're able to guarantee and show savings of over $138,000 a year as part of doing this project. And the best part is that cost savings is ultimately going back towards paying for the project year over year. So it really allowed the county not to have to, come out of pocket for all these things that had to get done, and allowed us to do them all at the same time and have the savings pay for those upgrades. The other really nice benefit that I know is really important to you guys at the county, especially now, as I believe you have a climate smart committee, is the greenhouse gas reductions and what this does for the environment. So as part of this job and the updates that were done, you're seeing 565 metric tons of CO2 being removed from the environment, which is equal to 665 acres of trees, which is a big number. Energy for 68 homes and 120 cars off the road, which is something to be certainly proud of, and just another nice benefit for a project like this. So overall, the project went really, really well, super successful, and looking for just to continue on with that trend with the phase 2 job. So I'm going to move to the next slide here, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott Clark, our project director, and let him take you through the start of the phase 2 project.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mitch. I appreciate it. And good evening, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight. I'm going to try not to go too fast, but I also know there's a lot of text and a lot of other slides. So I'll try and move it along. If there's any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to flag it and we can circle back at the end. So as Mitch mentioned and Ron had both talked about, a lot of our focus was at the public safety building in the first phase. Then we did a little bit over at 325 for human services. For the second phase, we really tried to capture pretty much everything else within the county facilities, with a really heavy focus on the county office building, since there's a desire to try and stay there. So we kind of went through, the county office building, the courthouse, the DMV, and then a number of the outposts and salt sheds, which while they're smaller buildings, there's still some upgrades there to try and capture them. We'd like to see whatever energy savings we can pull in. Probably the biggest thing and what we wanted to hit on is there are some energy savings measures that we're going to get into at the county office building, but we also were working with CPL to try and look at what ADA and capital improvements needed to be performed at that building. So we worked with them to kind of come out. They did an evaluation and assessment to see what would need to happen, what's there now, where do we need to go. And so the proposal that we have would include the following items that are on here to try and bring that building up to code compliance, so that way you are accessible to the entire public for the county, for everybody that comes in. So it would include accessible washrooms on the first and third floor, so that somebody can get in a wheelchair instead of what's there now is a little bit difficult to use for some folks. It would be adding an elevator addition that would serve floors 1, 2, and 3. So there'd be a new elevator tower and an elevator installed. As part of that, that would allow service to all of those levels, so you can really put any of the various offices you'd like on any level instead of keeping everything down on the ground floor. We are going to be replacing ceilings in the building, and a lot of that would be due to just the sheer volume of other work you would have to do. And by that, I'll get to that and kind of some of those other bullet points below. But it would be new ceilings, a new ramp at the east entrance to allow for wheelchair access. We'd be reinforcing the parapet wall up on the roof, since it is kind of part of the historical facade and character of the building itself. But it needs some repointing. It's a little bit shaky up there right now. We'd be modifying the stair railings because it turns out that right now the building is operating under a sort of a special exemption to allow you to have open stair towers that go through the entire building. Those would still need to stay, but we would be trying to make sure that those railings are going to be code compliant for use. We would be installing new sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, and smoke detection systems, which is a really big part of bringing the building up to code and to allow those continued open stairwells that you have. And that's part of the reason why the ceilings need to be replaced, because there's a lot of new piping that needs to be installed. We would be looking to install a backup generator to allow for continued IT access if you're going to need it, but also to make sure the elevator is going to continue to operate in the event of an emergency or a power outage, so nobody's stranded on the upper floors if they've managed to get up there. As part of that, we would be looking to replace all of the existing electrical distribution in the building, as well as the switchgear. What's there now is kind of woefully undersized. As Brian McDonald and Ron can tell you, there's electrical panels hidden behind little doors behind radiators, and they've kind of been added here and there throughout the building. In some cases, there's some Romex that's been installed once upon a time that's not code compliant for a commercial building. And we were going to need a much larger service to be able to support that elevator installation as well. So it's kind of something that it's going to need to be replaced because replacement parts are hard to find. So now is the ideal time to kind of capture that. And then we would also be looking at a full roof replacement, which there's already more than one layer of roof on it. It would be a full tear off and replace. The roof that's up there is in pretty rough shape. So that's kind of a lot of the ADA capital heavy stuff that doesn't traditionally fall under our energy project. But what's not listed here is we're also looking to replace the heating and cooling systems within that building. So we've kind of broken those out a little bit separately. So for a little bit of other detail, and I know that's a big chunk to kind of bite off at once, I was going to have Ryan Urshow, who is our senior energy engineer on the project. I'm going to have him just sort of touch lightly on some of the other measures that we're looking to include. We're going to try and keep those kind of high level. We have some more detailed slides if somebody wants to get into them, but it's still kind of early in the night and I don't want to put people to sleep that early. So I'm going to kick it over to Ryan for right now, and we can circle back if there's other questions towards the end. So all yours, Ryan.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. So just as Scott mentioned, a large driver was to provide the capital upgrades to the county office building, bring it up to ADA compliance. So while also addressing the aging energy users in the buildings mentioned in the previous slide. So what this slide does is it kind of is a high level of the energy efficiency measures, FIMS, facility improvement measures for the buildings that were included in the preliminary scope. So as you can see, we took a look at LED lighting, very similar to what we did in the first phase, only we would be doing this in the county office building, the courthouse, DMV, and outposts. We also took a look at building envelope improvements. That's basically ceiling, roof, wall joints where appropriate, weather strippings on doors, windows. We did a lot of that in the first phase as well. Some motor improvements. So we would look at imposing controls on existing motors that are running. There's actually existing fuel pump that was running not during the heating months, and we would like to control that to kind of turn that off. Basically, a small O&M measure. Building controls improvements. So we would look at putting in the building automation system in the new building, the county office building, and the DMV. Very similar to the jail in the in 325 building that we did in the first phase. So it would basically put it all on one platform to have one point of access for the county. Boiler improvements. So we would look to replace the existing boilers at the DMV with high efficiency condensing boilers. So what that'll do is just give you high efficiency, less energy use, and less wear and tear in the systems. So windows improvements, we would look at installing window film. And what that'll do, that kind of gives you energy savings during the winter time, because it kind of reduces the heat transfer, while also in the summer reducing the solar load on the building. Roof improvements, which were kind of touched on in the previous slide, basically replacing the roof of the county office building, which will increase the R value, so you'll have better heat, or heat transfer will be less through the roof. And then refurbishment of the roof over at the DMV, because there's some places there that are in rough shape. And then the HVAC improvements, which are basically replacing the steam boilers at the county office building with new hot water condensing boilers as part of the capital upgrade. It'll allow for a more efficient operation control, especially if it's paired with the building control system. We would look to replace, says I'm very quiet, sorry. Everybody can hear me pretty good. So this will allow for more efficient operation and control, especially if it's paired with the building control system. So replace window AC units with a new centralized cooling system via chilled water and direct expansion rooftop units. So that kind of sums up the facility improvement measures. There's also other measures considered on this page, which this will basically get looked at more during the next phase, which would be the investment grade audit. And we would look at replacing the cooling tower on top of the DMV, the self-contained units, the carrier air conditioning units in the basement of the DMV, and then the heating coils, which were actually proposed in the first phase at the public safety building. We would look at trying to roll that into this project as well to try to address that need that wasn't met in the first project. So, these are kind of the lower savings measures, but are high on the list of items that we would like to get replaced. So with that, I can hand it back over to Mitch if nobody has any questions, and let him kind of finish up with the financials of the project.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. And I think Scott touched on this, and I know Ron did. I just want to kind of reiterate and touch on the fact that these are the kind of traditional energy conservation measures that, we specialize in, and something that we did in phase one. A lot of the ADA stuff that Scott mentioned, it's overlapping with specifically the heating system and the cooling system at the county office building. So a lot of what we're trying to do with the energy conservation stuff is also contingent upon the ADA stuff. The new roofs and the walls and access. Right now, everything's hard ceiling and needs to be taken down to be able to really put the correct system in place there. So with that said, let's look at the financials. So these are preliminary numbers. By no means are these firm final numbers, because we're just not there yet. There's a lot to still look at and dive into, and that's kind of where we come into play here, is to say, is there enough support on this project to move it forward so we can actually put together a final project and show you what actually is a build ready project. But as it stands right now, based on the preliminary assessment we completed and CPL, the total project cost is just around 8.5 million. Again, very capital heavy with a lot of the things that Scott touched on. The incentive, it's showing pretty small there. Again, there's a reason for that. It's a prelim number, so we haven't done any analysis with National Grid on it. It's really just hey, there's lighting savings. We know we can get that. Anything else related to the other energy systems, or even any savings from putting on the new roof or anything else, we're going to have to look at a little bit more closely once we figure out what's in scope. We didn't want to show anything that potentially wouldn't end up coming through to fruition. So that number will likely be built up. And I think in phase one, we showed a pretty conservative number, and we end up cutting a lot of checks to the county, because everything above what we show, you guys get back. So that's the way it's structured with the agreement that we have. So really the total project cost still remains around 8.5 million. Estimated capital contribution. So, there is energy savings, as you can see. And again, this is a conservative number of $42,000 a year. We'll likely, as we get to the next phase, look to capture more than that. But there's just not enough savings, in energy and cost savings to be able to really fund everything that you guys need to have done there. It does help fund some of the projects, certainly, but it's not everything. So you're seeing a capital contribution of 8.1 million. There's a couple different ways to go about that, and you'll see it on the next slide as I get to the cash flow. The county can either do that all in one shot in year one, and ultimately the rest is, over the term is paid for by savings, or you can look to break it out over the term of 20 years and pay a set amount each year for 20 years. So those are things that we can explore if and when we get there. But again, capital heavy, which is why, with this project, there's certainly more contribution needed than the previous one, and some less savings there as well. The cash flow. So I apologize for it being very small print. I will plan to send this slide deck out and share it after the meeting. Really what this is going to show you is how the project will be paid back over the 20 years. So you'll see in year 0, ultimately that's when we're building it and getting it implemented. And then year 1 is when the first year of the savings, the first year of actually being in the buildings after they've been updated. And that's where you start, seeing the savings as well as a contribution if it is done up front from the county. And then below here is where the payments go. So ultimately, in order to be an energy performance contract, which is what we're trying to build here, it's got to be cash neutral or budget neutral. So you'll see that each year of the term, you're showing, positive $1. And so that's the way it's structured now. We've talked around Caponera. We'll continue to talk to him about how that looks, but really the way this looks is it needs to come out cash neutral each year. And in order to do that, it either needs to have a large contribution in the front end, or it has to have it throughout the term of the project.
Hey, Mitch, this is Art Basson. I'm the Ancrum supervisor. I've got a question or two for you. Could you go back to the last slide, please?
Absolutely.
The 42,000 year 1 total savings is project total composite, right? That's everything?
Correct.
Is the estimated payback term different for various components of the project? If you broke that $8.5 million down into its components, are there some elements that are more relatively attractive than 20 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can we see that chart at some point?
Sure. Yeah, we've provided some level of breakdown to the county that kind of broke some of that out. A lot of it is going to be, the energy conservation measures that Ryan went over, specifically lighting, and some of those other ones are going to be much less than 20 years. And the ADA stuff is just, I don't even know what the payback is. It's beyond probably calculation.
Yeah, I think we need to see that broken out before we can make an intelligent decision about what to do and what not to do. Second question I have is there grant money out there that can basically support some or all of that $8.5 million?
There's likely some opportunity. I know Ron, I'd have to defer to Ron not a little bit, because I know that he's been more involved with the county, and Ron Caponera on some of that. We looked at just utility incentive. There may be some other opportunities. We haven't specifically dove into that from the energy savings side. I'd have to defer to Ron and the county on any other grant money that would be available besides energy related.
Okay, thank you very much.
Art, if you want real quickly, I don't have all the breakout in front of me, but when we looked at this, it seems to me that about $4 million of this project is strictly going to ADA compliance in 401. And that figure actually allows them to be able to do some of the energy project a little cheaper than if you went in and did the energy project alone, So it is overlapping a little bit, and we knew that going in. To your question of is there grant money for ADA compliance, there's always something out there, but we didn't dig into that. If you just broke this into an energy project and said, what if we just did the energy in 401, I will tell you, even that number doesn't look as great as it did in the public safety building, because to replace the steam system in 401 and the electric service and things like that. Some of that is just maintenance, and it needs to be done whether we want to save energy or not. It's just it's a big project. So
Yeah, okay, I understand, Ron. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Ron, there was a lot of that just needed to be done, is right, like the roof. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we have some more details besides kind of the high level that we've gone over in some additional slides, like Scott said, that we'd be happy to get into, but like Ron mentioned, we did provide a breakout, the ADA stuff, which is, over $4 million of the scope provides zero savings. So the payback is not even there. And then everything else is, we're trying to help make it look more attractive with a lot of the other energy stuff. But even a lot of the other energy stuff is really contingent upon the ADA to be able to put the right type of system in place. Without the ADA stuff, it really limits the ability to do a whole lot there, or at least do it the right way, the way you guys need to have it done. So happy to get into it more, certainly, as you want to. The last, main slide we have before kind of opening it up is the next steps or the timeline. So right now, this is where we are. We're presenting our preliminary findings, and really giving it to you to say, what do you think? What do you want to do? If the county approves to move forward, the next step would be for us to actually get into our investment grade audit, which is where we're going to dig in deeper, do full development, and start getting some more of those answers, some more, real numbers. A final number ultimately will come that we present and say, here it is. This is the final cost. This is the final, project. Do you want to move forward with it? And so we have 8 months listed in here. Again, a lot of the ADA stuff is going to take a while, and we're going to be working with CPL on that. The energy stuff we can do fairly quickly. It doesn't usually take us more than a couple months, but we'll have to work along with the ADA stuff and make sure it's done right. We certainly don't want to rush it, but this is just a preliminary, placeholder, 8 months. But the plan would be, if the county wants to move forward, a task order is issued for us to move into develop a final scope of work and full development. From there, we come back with a final scope. It goes to the county, just like it did with phase 1, for final approval. And if it's approved to move forward, then we will start construction and build it. And then, at the end, you've got training, commissioning, everything that needs to happen to make sure that it can be fully utilized, and everyone is aware of what they need to be aware of when it comes to the new improvements will be provided as well. So that's the next steps in the timeline. And so that's where we like to kind of stop at this point at a high level and really open it up for any other questions or comments. We do have some additional slides that get into quite a bit more detail on the items that we're looking at, even some photos. Like I said, I'll share the slide deck out so you can get some of those. But I'd like to open it up at this point, or turn it back over to Ron and see if you have any last comments, or I think that's what we had to present today.
Hi, Mitch.
I would like to take some questions. I see Linda Mussman has her hand up to start with.
When or how do we calculate the displacement of the working staff? Let's say at 401, like where does that number come from? Like, how do you calculate that rental of space for the workers while the building is virtually closed?
We have not entered that in there, but you are correct, Linda. This is something that, in my mind, if we were to do a project of this magnitude, we would have to relocate staff for a while, like we did when we did the courthouse. If you remember that project, we leased a building and moved everybody out there, and it was a big part of the job. I won't say that, some people might think you could work around there, but I would like to think that we'd evacuate this building so the workers could do what they got to do. But that's something that would be discussed. I think what this is being presented for is, as you know, we've had lots of talks over the years of what do we do. And a lot of the questions always came back to, well, if we were to decide to stay at 401, what does it cost to stay there? So here we have a pretty solid number of what it would cost to stay there. So we need to chew on that. Trustee,
Supervisor Holtling's hands up, Ron.
Yeah, so being relatively new to the board, this may have already been answered, but one big thing you said, Ron, is if we choose to stay at 401, have we done a cost comparison? $8.5 million seems like a lot of money to me. Sometimes older buildings are harder to retrofit. And it always struck me as odd that we have so many buildings. I understand like the court being a standalone county building, the jail being a standalone county building, but has anyone done a cost comparison over a 10 or 20 year period, specifically looking at if we took DSS, 401, 325, if we took all these offices and made one central location that we built, from the ground as an ADA compliant space that was, in line with all the current regulations, that was retrofitted for energy efficiency, over 10 or 20 years, just the energy savings alone from having one building instead of 5 could be significant. Have we yet sat down and done a cost comparison of retrofit? Because we're also only really talking about one building here. So then what about the other buildings that now need ADA compliance and all of these things? So if you take $8.5 million and add it to DSS and DMV, just those two alone, we're now at $25 million. It seems like if we sat down and really did a numbers comparison, we might be better off with taxpayer money looking at one central county building, with the exception of the court and the jail, that was all of our offices combined into one. Have we looked at that?
so yes, that's something we've been talking about for years, and that's why these other projects have come out. When the county bought Occoquan, that was a consideration. One of the big issues you have to remember is that there's many county departments that are required by statute to remain in the city of Hudson. So some of these departments can't move out of the city. Where do you go in the city? That's why we started looking at John L. Edwards when that was open. That was a consideration there. Can I sell 3 buildings and move into there? As you know, that building was for sale for $4 million, and the city of Hudson did kind of an in-depth study, and they said that was about a $20 million renovation project to use it the way they wanted to use it at that time. So nothing comes cheap. And again, so we've done some of that analysis, but I don't think there's one piece of property in the city of Hudson that we're going to buy, that we're going to do a 100,000 square foot building on and get rid of all of our buildings. So, and have parking too.
Thank you. And I just had one other question for, I think it was Mitch that was presenting at this time. The phase 1 annual cost savings was $138,329, which is awesome and impressive. What was the total cost of that project, just to do a comparison of how many years of savings it takes to get that investment?
Sure. So that project, I think, came in around 2.7 million for just the energy conservation items.
Great. Thank you.
Again, the reason that we went after the public safety building, you got to remember the public safety building is a 24/7 building. That building never stops. And the lights are on all the time. The heat and air conditioning is on all the time. And all of the equipment in there had aged out at the same time. And we knew that whether we wanted to save energy or not, we needed to replace the equipment. You needed to make a $2 million investment in the equipment. And that's kind of where we are with 401 too. If you're going to stay in there, you got to fix the building. But so there was a lot of energy to be captured in that first project. That's why we did that first. It was a good test run, and the project worked out very well. But we know that 401 would be a very capital-heavy project, mostly because of the ADA portion of it. And working in an old historic building in the city of Hudson is not easy either. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, we threw a lot of different things around, right, Ron, as far as different buildings and looking for different places, and even taking the building we have now and adding on to it, and it didn't seem like there was much available.
Well, we're still entertaining ideas, but those are things that have been kicked around for years. And I'd like to remind people that weren't around. It took almost 10 years for the county to make a decision as to how to remodel the Columbia County Courthouse. We were under ADA compliance issue. Rob's been around long enough to remember some of those issues, but that took a long time to pull the trigger on that and make it happen. And then it took a year and a half to get it done and then relocate everybody back in there. But now we've got a very nice energy efficient building in the city of Hudson that performs well, so.
But I
Supervisor,
think, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Leader has her hand up.
Thank you. Just real quick, don't we have a grant writer that we can maybe look at some grants or some help extra also? And the energy, I just did the whole town of Kinderhook with LED, and it was through NICEC, and was really, we got a very good price, and it cost us nothing at all. So I think, are you shopping around, Mitch, for like some of that energy cost and so forth?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're completely agnostic when it comes to what we're looking to use and do. We're very much cost conscious in terms of what's costing what and how we're going about it. In terms of the grants, I know, again, we've talked around a little bit about, because this has come up, can we get this money somewhere else? And, there may be some opportunities. We haven't dug into that yet because we haven't gotten there yet. So.
That's it for questions, Ron. Nobody else has their hands up yet.
Nobody else got any questions or comments? But we'll share this PowerPoint with everybody, and you can scroll through it and look at some of the other pictures more in depth. And I think I talked to Sarah today. We're going to call a space utilization committee meeting. I haven't had one in a while because I wanted to get this presentation into the full board so that people have all of this information to think about a little bit. So.
Okay, Supervisor Adams has her hand up now.
Yes, Brenda.
So my question is just to go back to the grant issue. Anything that's associated with maintenance would not be eligible for grant funding. Is that correct?
Probably depends on which grants you're talking about, but as far as the energy, when we're trying to capture energy savings, that's mostly what Mitch's job is can we install lighting and save money? And yes, he's going to get rebates and in the first project, I think Mitch brought us in about $80,000 worth of rebates and grant money from NYSERDA, or from NICEC rather. Yeah, National Grid. I'm sorry, get the right word there.
So we'd move away from the use of the word maintenance, and we would describe this all as energy upgrades.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. But we're trying to put this all into an energy project, and one of the great parts about this type of energy project is that typically when the county goes out and you want to buy a new boiler, you go out to bid and you get the cheapest boiler. This energy project allows us to get the most energy efficient system out there. So it may not be the cheapest cost, but it's the cheapest long-term cost because of energy savings built into it. Yes, Jimmy?
Yeah, the public safety building really worked out well for us because we captured a lot of savings and a lot of maintenance. I would say the electric motors and heating systems and everything. Where we're running into trouble with 401 is we're capturing some, but most of it is maintenance items or the roof or ADA compliance, which we can't get that kind of money back. But to do the things that we need to do to capture the energy, we're going to be ripping the building apart considerably. That's the idea of trying to, roll into the ADA and some of the other items like the roof and everything, roll it into it for savings. So you may not see as much savings up front, but in the long run, we're believing, and we got to look at the numbers closer. We're believing that this project could still work for us, even though the back end is not going to show as much money,
So I was wondering if it's worth it to have our county grant writers look into the ADA piece of grants, because just on a quick Google search, there is grant funding for government entities to become ADA compliant specifically for voting access. So because we have the Board of Elections located in the building, it basically says, large grants are available to states and counties to ensure that the disabled have access to polling places. And the Board of Elections is an early voting location and other access. So I'm wondering if it's just worth our grant writers looking into the ADA piece specifically for potential grants.
It is and it would be, and we certainly would go down all of those avenues. We just need the Board of Supervisors to decide which direction are we going to go into. We've been talking about different directions for almost 20 years now. If we decided to be committed to remaining in 401 State Street for the next 20 or 30 years, here's a project, and then you start trying to find out how to fund it.
Ron, just one comment. I remember looking at the various alternatives to move out of 401 State Street, either to Walmart or to Aquamic. And my recollection is the number was much, much bigger than $8 million.
You are correct, Art. I can't remember some of those numbers off the top of my head either, but I think the renovations, it shocked me. The renovations of Walmart came in at $25,000.
25 million.
So.
Yeah, I think $8.5 million may be a bargain to stay where we are, but we'd probably have to look at that again and take a look at what Walmart and Aquamic would have cost us.
Right. And you do got to remember, it is a 30,000 square foot building in the city of Hudson with parking. So, and structurally, I think the building is sound. So it may be worth investing some money in, but this is a conversation we got to have.
Supervisor
remember-
Collins has his hand up.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. Done it?
And we have 10 minutes left, guys.
Okay. Donnell, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. The ADA work that's proposed, is that to satisfy a base requirement anyway? Like that work needs to be done? Or is it, more of a peripheral?
So yeah, it does need to be done. Again, we get by because we've been in the building and it is what it is. And nobody's pushed any buttons, but the city of Hudson supervisors can tell you, they got in trouble for that, and then they had to bring it into compliance. And that's what happened at our courthouse years ago too. We have the building functioning with certain things, but and we have people that are willing to come downstairs and wait on them so that we get by with some of that ADA compliance questions. But the building should be better ADA compliant, sprinkler systems and things like that. Elevator would just be a whole nice feature to the building as well as ADA compliance. It makes it more usable. So yes, it's something that someday somebody's going to say, yeah, you have to do this. And now that we're talking about it, it could happen quicker than later, but.
All right, thank you, Ron.
No problem. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we'll wrap this up for now, and people can certainly ask questions later, and we'll chat more about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the
very much,
presentation.
everybody,
Thank you.
Thanks for the time, guys.
no problem.
Mitch, is it okay to send this out to the supervisors?
I'll send you a version, a different version, but I'll get that over to you shortly, Kelly.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.